Carrigan. I love this. She's a legend. She's a legend.
You know, I can't decide if when people say you're a legend, if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, that the undertone there could be you're old.
Yeah, but you know what? It's the. Do you watch basketball at all?
I do. Are you kidding?
Okay, it's the Michael Jordan versus LeBron debate.
Yeah.
I personally think Michael Jordan is the greatest of all time because I saw him play. But the younger generation is going with LeBron.
Yep.
And one of their major reasons why is his longevity. And, you know, the Michael Jordan people say longevity doesn't matter. And that's where I all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I'm a Michael Jordan guy, but longevity does matter.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, because if you can sustain a certain level of performance for a longer time, even if this guy killed it, if he did it for a shorter time, I'd rather take the guy who can do it for a longer time.
You know, I got to tell you, though, there's so much to that debate. Because, yes, longevity, maybe we see that now, but we're seeing a whole lot of guys who are, you know, longevity is part of but it's because the game has changed. Mm-hmm. You can stand on the outside and throw 3-pointers
all day
and not get beat up when you're charging the basket, right? Like Michael Jordan did over and over and over, and eventually, you know, your body wears down. So it's not just that's just an analogy, basketball, right? I mean, that's for so many things. You know, the game has changed.
Yeah,
and life is either tougher or it's harder. You know,
but athletes have changed too because you look at in football, Tom Brady lasted into his 40s. And
absolutely
performing at a ridiculous level into his 40s.
Yeah.
So
well, he was a smart guy. He stayed in the pocket.
Yeah.
Again.
And he also did so many things that nobody ever... Well, no, I shouldn't say that nobody ever talked about. They talked about it, but they did it in a way where they made fun of him almost. Yeah. They were like, oh, he's doing avocado ice cream and he doesn't eat strawberries. And it's like, okay, yeah, but it's not like that one thing is going to change everything, but a lot of little things equal a big thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they were like, come on, get out and party. Well, who's partying now?
Right. Exactly.
He paid his dues and made his money and made his fame, and now he can do whatever he wants. It's great.
I'm all about, and I know you're about that too, because I know you're a big fitness person.
Yeah.
Which I love.
I am. In fact, I was at the end of day 6 today, and toward the end, I was like, you know what? I need a break today. So I got through this morning's workout, and I'm going to take the weekend off. But I am a firm believer that when I don't exercise, I am mentally not as sharp, and I'm a much crabbier human. Mm-hmm. I really am. Once you, and I know you and I've had this conversation before, once you become addicted to it, it really dictates your life. Mm-hmm. It really does.
100%.
Yeah.
I know your dad was a bodybuilder, you told me.
Exactly.
Like he did shows and everything?
To this day, he's 85.
Really?
And, I don't know if this is since you and I have seen each other, but Dad had an aneurysm burst in the gym. And this was in September of, it's not been since we've seen each other. We've seen each other since, but it was in September of 23. And he went down and should have been dead on the floor. And there happened to be a highway patrolman in the gym who started CPR and got a crew there and got him out. And 9 hours of surgery and then another 9 hours of surgery. Now he's 85 today, so he's 83 years old. And my father is in the gym every day, alive, and he was on a ventilator for 10 days. They never thought he would live. But my point telling you this story is that Dad has always lived his life saying, bad things are going to happen to all of us. Mm-hmm. But if we go into them ready, if we're in a little better shape, you don't have to be like my dad's been, but if you're in a little better shape, you're just a little healthier, you just got a better chance.
100%.
And man, is he the living proof of that.
Was he the one that got you into fitness?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, he was the one who got me into fitness and understanding how important it can be in your life. TV got me into fitness because you just can't be the fat girl.
Yeah.
You just can't. You cannot be the fat girl.
Yeah.
So when you walk into a studio, you walk into a TV newsroom. For as thin as you think women are, they're ultra thin. I mean, I'm not a big woman, but I was much smaller even then when I was on TV. So it's
Really?
crazy. Cindy Fitzgibbon, my dear, dear friend, she could tread water in a garden hose.
Wow.
She's a little teeny tiny woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you guys get the focus groups where they're like, I don't like Kim's hair, length, color, all that stuff.
I mean, honestly, Romero, it's so great now. Sometimes I think to myself, why don't I just go ahead and get that skunk thing down the middle of my head? Because I can. Because for so much of my life, you couldn't cut your hair without permission. One time I decided I was in a funk and I was depressed and, one of those times in your life. So I go to my hairdresser, who'd been my hairdresser from the time I walked into Boston. She still is to this day. And I went into her and I said, I want my hair to be red. And she said, nope, I'm not going to do it. I said, yes, you are. I said, I'm going to be a redhead. I worked at BZ at the time, WBZ. And so she walked away and she left me sitting in the chair. And I sat there and I told her, I said, Gail, I'm not getting up until my hair is red. So she said, all right. But she said, I hope, do you want to call your husband? Do you want to think this through? I said, no. So she turned my hair red. And I loved it. Oh, I was a good redhead. My daughter's a redhead. And I mean, I was a good redhead. I got green eyes. I was a good redhead. So I strutted myself out of there and I went home and I called my husband and I said, I just want you to prepare you. I did a little something different with my hair. He walks into the house. He takes one look at me and he says, you cannot go back to work. And I just busted out crying because he was right and I knew it and Gail had told me and there was no way I could work. There'd be no way. So I go in the next morning and Peter Brown was the news director and I walked in. I didn't go see him. I went into my office. Few people saw me. A couple minutes later, there's a knock on my door. I open the door. Peter Brown is standing there. And he said, hi. I said, good morning, Peter. And he said, good morning. You look fabulous. Now you have to go home. And I had to go home and I had to call the hairdresser and I had to have it put back.
Wow.
And I never even went on TV. They never let me on.
Was it were you having an existential crisis or something?
I was. I don't, and I really, to this day, I'm not exactly sure what that crisis was. Who knows, But it was a moment where I just felt like I needed to be a new me. And I thought if I was a redhead, that would do it.
Yeah.
I would say it's one of the most irrational things I've done, really. I mean, it was irrational. It was ridiculous. And I knew I couldn't do it. I knew it was a no-no, but...
Yeah.
But Peter let me have the day off. I got my hair reversed.
Isn't that crazy? Moose? That it used to be. I think it's a little different now. I mean, people still judge like crazy, but back then, it was like when I first got into radio. It was like radio and TV were it. If somebody came into a new city, the way they got to know that city was radio and TV. It's so different now. Like you can move across the country now and still completely be attached to your old city and just be like, oh, I just got to drive to. Well, actually, you know what? Let me take that back. You could be working in a different city.
You could be working in your city, right?
Yeah. But it used to be just so different. So being on TV, especially on the local news, or being on the radio, you had a little more. We were like the original influencers, in a way. Right. So,
before I came here, so I worked out in the Midwest. I'm a Midwesterner. So I got this gig at Channel 7, and I originally was hired at Channel 7 to do 5, 6, and 11. But there was someone ahead of me and their contract wasn't up. And they wanted to make sure that they eased me in knowing that Boston's audience was tough.
Yeah.
So they signed me to a six-month deal for weekends. And I had a clause that I couldn't tell anyone why I was really there. So I started on the weekends knowing that in that short amount of time. And what they started to do was rotate me in as frequently as they could so the audience would get to know me.
Yeah.
But before I went on the air, they set me up with a local historian / language person. And they taught me how to say Worcester and Peabody. And I mean, we went through a litany of, things that I would know, that I would be familiar with, so that it appeared that when I ultimately in that 6 months sat down at that desk, that I had been here forever. and that people would know me. Well knowing, again, this was Sunbeam, so this is even, they went that far to make sure. They just wanted people to think I was a local because they knew that was imperative if I was going to survive here.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I was lucky that I grew up in this area.
Right.
So many things were just natural to me. But I remember an old program director and I got into a little discussion. Well,
a little row.
Yeah. Look, at the time, I know that he didn't like me. I definitely didn't like him. Now looking back on it, I'm a little more mature. I'm like, listen, we just had different philosophies, different styles. But it was one of our, I won't say daily, but weekly we got into it about stuff. And one time, I forget what we were arguing about, and he goes, "Do you know what your problem is?" And I said, "What?" And he goes, "You've been in this market your entire life. That's your problem." And I said, "How?" I go, "Okay, do you know what your problem is?" I said, "You worked at this city for 2 years, this city for 2 years, this city for 2 years. There's a benefit to that, but there's a huge benefit to me because there's things that I do just naturally by accident that somebody who's coming into this city would almost have to learn."
You bet.
You know?
I do.
And just like talking about stuff. Oh, the place down by the street in Saugus, down Route 1 by the Orange Dinosaur. It's just natural things that you say that people understand. So then I hit him with this because he was a big sports guy. I said, "Let me ask you a question." I go, "So if you were an athlete, would you rather be the player who plays for this team for a couple of years, then gets traded to this team, then goes to this team?" I go, "Or would you rather be like Derek Jeter, who's been on the Yankees for his entire career? Nobody else has been able to replace Derek Jeter, a shortstop." And he said, "Well, that's a different comparison." I go, "No, it's not. It's if you could spend." I was lucky that I was born in a big city and that I got on in a big city.
Right.
Like if I was born in a smaller city or whatever, of course I'd want to work in a big city. I said, but if you were born in a big city and you got to be on your hometown and it's a major market and if you got a chance to be there from the beginning and 10, 15 years, 20 years later still be there, you choose that over traveling around and going to Mama Can't Find You, Arizona, and then working your way up here and then finally making the big city.
Oh, so true. And I think, I got to tell you, as somebody who has worked in other markets, and you're right, there's an advantage to that in some ways. That you do bring with you, some sensibilities from other places which you can adapt and you can make work. But I will say this. I think one of the great advantages that other people had over me in this city was that they were from this city.
Yeah.
Boston is a hometown place. We want to think this is a great, big, huge city, but the fact of the matter is it really is a small town.
Yeah.
And invariably, let's take Maria Stefanos, for example. I mean, I've always been so envious of Maria because she's from here. People know her. She knows everybody she meets, not because she's on TV, because she knew them from some other means or whatever. And I've always just so admired the fact that she turned that into something so positive for her, and she used it to her advantage, and it's a great thing.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Now let's rewind. So you said you were born in Midwest?
Yeah. I'm a Missourian.
Okay, Missouri. All right. And did you start off in?
I did. So I went to the University of Missouri, great journalism school, and I'm appreciative of the education I got there always. And they had an NBC affiliate. The school owned the local NBC affiliate, so that's one of those great advantages that you have when you go to a school like that. My daughter went to Syracuse, went to the J school there, another great school, but they didn't have that. They didn't have that broadcast element like that. So I was able to anchor news before I left college on a commercial television station.
Nice.
Not nice, because if anybody could find that, it would have been so horrific. Thank goodness those were days when there was no social media, so nobody could find that. But so I spent that time there, and then I got a job in a really small market. And you know how this works. TV goes from 220 to 1, being New York, market sizes. And I would say that TV station was about 210. It was all 3 affiliates at the time. It was an ABC affiliate, an NBC affiliate, and a CBS affiliate. They got to pick the programming that they wanted and air it. Right? So KQ2 in St. Joseph, Missouri. But what it did teach me, I was a weekend anchor there, and I was a reporter during the week, and you carried your own stuff you shot your own stuff. You edited your own stuff. You did the whole thing. So, I mean, I learned it from the ground up.
So you were the guy in the van?
I was the guy in the van. I was the guy who had to set the camera up and then run around it with the microphone.
Yeah.
And then you couldn't play it back in the field. And you get back to the studio and then like half your head would be cut off.
Yeah,
because,
yeah.
You're trying to judge it off a tree in the background or whatever. So it taught me a lot about the business. And I tell young people this all the time. They don't have that advantage because it doesn't work that way anymore. But having said that, don't hesitate to learn. I always tell them, don't hesitate to learn what somebody else is doing. Mm-hmm. Because I think what it really did for me was gave me a huge appreciation for everybody's job in the newsroom. Mm-hmm. I always appreciated what everybody else was doing. That guy who could shoot that video and edit it the way they could, as I progressed, man, was that fantastic. What a talent. It was fabulous. So anyway, I spent 6 long months there. And I went to another market in Missouri, started working around my soon-to-be husband. Mm-hmm. He was in law school, and I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay as close as I could. But I got a bigger job in a bigger market, making $23,000 a year. My gosh, I was I was taking on the world.
Balling.
I got to tell you. And
that's 2 haircuts.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, my rent was like, $160, right?
Yeah.
But it was great, and I spent my time there, and Randy and he got out of law school and we got married. And then I had an opportunity to go to WHO TV in Des Moines, Iowa. Now, I'm a Midwesterner, but I'd never been to Iowa.
Yeah.
So Ran and I flew up there to meet the news director and to see if it was something we'd be interested in. We thought we'd get out in a cornfield. So we were Missouri snobs, can you imagine? And as it turned out, it was just a really cosmopolitan little city. It was really cute and really great.
Really?
And we spent 4 years there. I was at WHO, which is a very famous. Those are famous call letters. They have radio and like BZ, radio and TV. And Ronald Reagan started his career in the radio station there. Wow. And it's probably the strongest powerhouse in all of the Midwest, the radio station there. And I spent 4 wonderful years there and had an opportunity in Boston. So I went from Market 63 to, at that time, Market 5.
Yeah. So did they contact you, or were you sending out tapes?
So I was sending out tape. I had a really fabulous big-time agent in New York who came and found me in Des Moines, which was great. And I had some other opportunities, but my husband's an attorney, and I wanted, if at all possible, to make that big jump that we could live with for a pretty long period of time where I'd be satisfied, because I knew I was going to have to yank him. He had already taken 3 bar exams for me, and I knew I was going to have to yank him and take him somewhere else. Right?
What kind of attorney is he?
So he's a corporate attorney.
Okay.
He's an investment attorney.
Yeah.
So I just wanted it to be right. So had an opportunity to go to Seattle. He said no, and we could have stayed and gone to St. Louis, but I knew that would never really be enough. And I wanted to go to Chicago, and then my agent came up with this deal to possibly go to Miami. So I thought, Miami, that might be interesting. Okay, so let's see. And they said, well, you have to fly to Boston to interview for the job in Miami. And I said, okay. So I flew up here to Boston. And I met with Joel Cheatwood, who was running Channel 7 at the time, but was also running WSVN in Miami. And he was looking for an anchor in Miami. I spent an afternoon with him, and I headed to the airport. And when I got to the airport, my agent called and said, you didn't get the job in Miami, but they'd like to know if you'd like the job in Boston instead. And I was like, oh.
That's awesome.
So, lo and behold.
And that's where you've been ever since.
And I've been here ever since.
And you've worked literally on every...
I never worked on Channel 5, but I worked at Channel 7. I was there for 9 years.
Yeah.
Jumped over to BZ. I was at BZ for 3, and then I went to Fox. Yeah. And I was at Fox for 9.5, almost 10 years.
Wow. That's where I know he was on Fox.
Yeah.
Well, when she was there, it was like... The morning show was pretty brand new at that point, right?
Yeah, I stepped in. So the morning show had been on the air for about 9 months. So they'd gone through all the hard work, right? And and I don't know why it escapes me right now, the woman who had my job.
I know who you're talking about because
I'll come up with it.
I know who you're
She
talking
was from New York.
Yeah.
And what happened was I got a call, my agent got a call from Fox in New York. And they wanted to know if I might have interest in the morning show in New York. And so I went to New York and I interviewed. And they were about to offer me the job when my agent called back and said, okay, so listen, they've thought about this, and Jody Applegate is from New York. She actually has a following in New York. And they said, why would we move Kim to New York where nobody knows her when we could move Jody to New York and keep Kim in Boston? Would that be of interest to you? And that was of great interest to me because, my husband had a job here. We were established. I had kids. And I said, awesome, let's do it. And Jody said, fantastic, Okay. And so she went back to New York. And
I remember her real fast. And then I'm like, wait, where did she go? And then you also had, what was her name? British girl. Nemois Delaney.
So she didn't work in the morning show though with me.
Okay.
She was at Fox, but she worked later in the evenings.
Okay.
So she didn't. Yeah.
Because I remember the first time I got on mornings, she came on and did a segment. We did a big show like at a hotel and everything, and she came over and did a segment with us. And then there was another time where Pebbles she was off for a week of vacation or whatever. And I said, hey, do you want to come in and do the morning show with us? And she came in and filled in, and it was hilarious because I remember the British people call a bathroom the loo.
The loo.
Yeah.
So she leans over to Melissa and goes, where's your loo? And Melissa goes, where's who? And she said,
we have no loo here.
Yeah, she goes, the loo. And Melissa stared at her for about 10 seconds and goes, I'm sorry, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I said, she's looking for the bathroom. It's down the hall. It was the funniest.
Of course, Melissa.
Oh, dude, the interaction was, I couldn't stop laughing.
Oh,
but she was
God.
cool. So, okay, so you were at Fox for quite a while.
I was, almost 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was I've had great experiences in my life, but there were 5 of us who were the core of that ensemble group.
Yeah.
And the 5 of us get together and we, to this day, and we all talk about, and everybody's had other experiences, and Cindy and Doug are off, and Jean's still there, and Phoebe is in upstate New York, and but we all say those were the greatest years of our lives. We had the greatest experiences there. I mean, we became family first and foremost, and secondly, we pushed the limit. We walked to the line and dipped our toes on the other side.
I was literally just going to say, I didn't want to cut you off, but I was going to say, can I guess why? And I think a lot of it has to do with you were all doing this new thing together. Like you said, the show was on for 9 months before, but you guys were all learning. And there's something to when you're learning as a unit and you all get along and you're all kind of... It helps being like around the same age as the other people and stuff. There's something to, like you said, you're just like pushing stuff and learning and going, all right, that might have been a little too much, but you're all kind of on board.
Yep.
And you're growing together. Yeah, that's how it was when I first got on in the mornings, and just with the radio station. But
it's when you get that chance in a career, whether you work in television, radio, or if you're on a team in a corporate setting, if you get that once in a lifetime chance,
it's awesome.
You have been blessed.
Yeah.
And we all say that. We say it to this day, and we get together and we start laughing. And I mean, we met unbelievable people. We did ridiculous things. We gained the trust of the audience. We had at one point about a 2-week span where every morning show in the major markets, Fox O&Os, brought their producing teams and their writing teams and their anchor teams in to watch us. Because we beat Good Morning America, we were so strong, and they would ask us how it happened, and we were like, we have no idea. just sometimes it clicks. You just throw it against a wall and you see if it sticks, and it did, and it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
But then, like all good things, management starts getting concerned about dollars and egos, and so we got to a certain point, and then they decided it was time to start to peel it off, and so we first lost Doug, and it was crushing. And then the dynamic is never the same. And then it just slowly peeled off. We lost Doug, and then I went, and then Cindy went, and it just started. Unfortunately, good things come to an end.
How was that when they? Did you see it coming, or?
Yeah, I mean, I did. On that situation was a little bit different, I've not been re-signed twice in my life. My first time not being re-signed was at Channel 7 here. And that one was shocking. We were number one. We were the first team there at night to beat Natalie and Chet, and we held that. That was when NBC had must-see TV. That was ER and Seinfeld and all of that. It was in its heyday, and so we were an incredibly strong anchor team, and the show was doing very, very well. And I had contract. It was contract time. I was 8 months pregnant with my second, and we got through May ratings, and my agent was tough, and I was looking for the biggest contract that I'd had there, and for good reason. And I got a call on a Monday morning as I was standing there, big pregnant, getting my act together, and it was my agent, and he said, "Kim, is anybody home with you?" And I said, "No," and he said, "Well, okay, so let's just walk through this. You're not going to go to work today, and in fact, you're not going to go back." And it was a shock.
Yeah.
It was a shock. So, and that was a nasty, nasty experience. I mean, it turned into a nasty, that ended up on the front page of the New York Times, because I was a woman who was in a number one show and had high Q ratings in the marketplace and was 8 months pregnant and got fired for no reason.
Yeah, I was going to say, what was their reasoning that you wanted to?
The reason was dollars.
So they were like, you wanted too much money. We can't bring it down a little bit.
It's funny. How things can become very clear over time. But the reason was money. At the time, he wouldn't say that. He wouldn't say anything. He just said, we're changing directions. But I was the first, and then the next seat came open, and that contract came up, and boom, out. And then so they had decided that there was a dollar cap. And I mean, anybody who worked there now will tell you that there was a dollar cap on each seat. And when those seats came up and the cap had been reached, the time to go came. And Ed Anson didn't care. He didn't care. And he was a guy who he gave me great opportunities, and I will always be appreciative for those opportunities.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he was a guy who could separate personal and professional. Something I've always had a problem doing. And 2 weeks prior to this happening, I was in the Channel 7 box at the Red Sox game, and it was my husband and me and my, at the time, 4-year-old, and I'm sitting there great big pregnant, and Ed's sitting in front of us. And oh my gosh, he's talking to my son, and he's telling me what a great mom I am and how great this whole situation is.
He knew what was coming.
Absolutely he did. Yeah. 2 weeks later, boom.
That sucks.
Yeah, it was tough.
So did you called your husband immediately? And
oh yeah. And it turned into that was still part of those glory days of television in the marketplace. And when it started to leak out, that got crazy. And my agent had to come here and had to take over all of this stuff. And again, I mean, it ended up on the cover of the New York Times, and I got a cease and desist, and it was just a really tough, nasty thing. And then there was the big issue with my mental state associated with it. And, I'm 8 months pregnant, and we're trying to figure out if this baby is ready or not, because she's maybe going to come. And so my agent's trying to shield me from everything. And on the day that the news leaked, my agent got a call from CBS in New York. And they said, tell her not to worry. We got a job for her. We're going to move her across town. Which at the time I thought, okay. But in the end, that was a terrible thing. They were bigfooting the local guys. They had a plan.
Yeah.
Lisa Hughes had just gotten to town. Sarah Underwood was there. Two fabulous women, so good at their jobs. They didn't need me. They didn't want me. Why would they? I wouldn't have wanted me either, And so that was tough. It was a tough deal. And Ed Goldman ran the place, and Ed Goldman's a great guy, but Ed was being bigfooted by New York.
Yeah.
And he didn't like that.
That's tough.
Retrospect, that probably was a move I shouldn't have made. I should have said, thank you very much.
Yeah.
But I'm 8 months pregnant, and, we've just built a house, and I have a brand here, and, I wasn't ready to leave Boston for sure. And they didn't need me at CBB, and, so I ended up at BZ. And they built a show for me there, and they built it actually over on Channel 38 with Jack Williams. So we were going to do the 5 o'clock on BZ and then do an hour at 7 on Channel 38. So my job and my reason for being there would be this hour-long show that they were going to build on 38 that would be an alternative to the rush. To traffic. It would be your opportunity, because at that point there was no later news. So it would be your opportunity to see local news after you get home from work in the evenings. And so we started that show on the Tuesday after Labor Day in September of 2001. And 8 days later, New York and the world changed. And so did we.
Yeah. Happy accident.
Yeah.
Then everyone's watching the news.
Yeah. Although that show never came back. It was on 8 days.
Really?
Yeah. Because all those resources had to be put towards something else, and it never came back.
That's crazy, because that's such a common thing now, a 7 o'clock news. It just makes perfect sense.
Right. It made good sense then, too. It would have done very well, but it never came back.
So what'd they do with you?
So then they changed the 5 o'clock to an hour-long show from 5 to 6. And that meant that Sarah Underwood got bumped to another location. And that's not a good thing in a newsroom. So Jack and I were on from 5 to 6. And then it was Joe Shortsleeve and Lisa at 6, 6 and 11. Yeah. And I believe they started a 4:30 show, and that's where Sarah was. And it was ugly. It was ugly and it was tough.
Yeah.
It was, and they were gracious and kind to me, as kind as they could be. I would never, ever say that anyone there treated me badly, or we were all in a bad place.
It's very similar to sports, where somebody comes in and they have this guy who's been a great part of the team. This new person comes in and they're maybe outplaying you, or maybe they just the management sees potential in them, so they kind of start playing this person a little bit less, and then you have to manage all the relationships with everyone else,
Right.
And that's a big deal.
It is a big deal. It's a really big deal.
Yeah. What's your take on the current state of journalism now? Because I know with you doing Carrigan and Company, which is probably, you feel much more, I don't want to say vindicated, but a bit more, you're like way more hands-on, I must believe. But what's your current take on the state of journalism now? Because with so many things like social media, podcasts, different forms of media, is it like a whole new world? Do you think we've gone in a skewed direction? Like, when you look at it now, what goes through your mind? Well,
I'll tell you, the same thing that goes through my mind, I'm sure, is going through your minds with radio. And with, because it's all the same thing. Mm-hmm. Television news is not what it used to be, because there's so many more sources and so many places that you can go. Lifestyle patterns have changed, and especially since COVID. Lifestyle changes, you guys don't have people in the car as frequently maybe in the mornings as you used to. Right. And, people they're at home so they can see TV and they can see news and they can get their local news anywhere, everywhere, anytime. I always used to say Local television, news, and local radio will never go away because people always want to know what's happening in their backyard. And I do believe that's true. But what I didn't anticipate was all the sources that they would have to get that information.
Right. 100%.
I just didn't know. So it's very different. I think I don't. I made the statement, that was back in the golden age of Boston TV, and I'm so lucky that I had an opportunity to be a part of that. It was phenomenal. It was unbelievable. I feel like these young people now who do TV, and a lot of my friends who are still in TV would tell you their experiences are nothing like what we had. It's just very different. They're expected to do more for less and in less time, and it's just a very different atmosphere now, and it's just a different world. But I'm also very appreciative that there are other outlets, because people like myself, like you, Romero, when you're ready to give up that early morning, there are other ways that you can use your talents, and you can still be a part of the community, and you can still give back to the community in the way that you love to do. You just have to adapt.
I'll never forget when it was like around when the iPhone, the very first one, came out. So it was like 07, I think it was 07, 08. I forget who it was. I was just like BSing with one of people in the offices, and they said, no more competing with other radio stations. And I said, what do you mean? Because back then it was like you were competing for attention versus other radio stations. Same thing with TV. And they grabbed the phone and they said, this is your competition now. You're competing with somebody's best friend. You're competing with whatever they're listening to on this. And it's true.
Absolutely.
And since then, that was 07 when you had to pay 99 cents for a song and all that stuff. And
a text. You had to pay for a text.
Yeah. You didn't have a million apps. You didn't have, you had YouTube, but it wasn't what it is now. There was social media, but it wasn't what it is now.
There's no TikTok.
Yeah. Now
no Instagram.
It's crazy now.
What I don't get to, and like you both can probably attest to this, and I learned this from one of my professors in college, and it made zero sense to me. She was a producer at like CNN for a while, and she did like a lot of political news and stuff, but then she ended up opening up her own magazine company in Swampscott, Marblehead? Anyway, sorry. But I
might know this person.
Lauren Torloni?
I don't, but because I live in Swampscott. So
maybe it's like it's like one of the local magazines up there. Anyway, she used to always say on how competitive and dicey in the chopping block and all this. And one day we were learning about local news and its importance, all that stuff you kind of learn in the beginning. And what always struck my mind, specifically about Boston, is why didn't Boston have a long-form syndicated talk show? Now, hear me out. Back in the day, you had Oprah, who's based in Chicago. Oprah, obviously, years made a name for herself, one of, if not the greatest television host of all time. People, whether they were on press tours, junkets, whatever, would make the trek to Chicago to be on the Oprah show. Why? Because she was not only hitting the Midwest region at the time, at one point it was nationally, globally, if you will. People go to where? New York or LA to get their word out.
Yeah.
I never understood Boston. You're not only hitting a city and a state, you're hitting an entire region of the country.
Yeah.
Especially if it's on something like NBC or like WBZ, honestly. I know people in New Hampshire that tune into that. I just never understood why that wasn't taken, like why that opportunity was never seized. Because you have so many local news talent, so many radio talent, so many people that the locals will love and respect and give their honor to. But then also they could charm an entire other region of the country. I just never understood that. But they're so quick to cap someone off when they hit a certain salary. It just made no sense to me.
There used to be a show called People Are Talking, hosted by Tom Bergeron.
Tom Bergeron, right.
And that was based in Boston, right? Wasn't it?
It was. Yeah. Tom was here for that. Then he moved on, went to New York after.
He's going to be hosting a show, by the way, for Shark Week called Dancing with the Sharks. I swear to God, I saw them in the news today.
I love that.
But do you get that concept, though? Because
I understand exactly what you're saying. So when I was at Channel 7, Sunbeam decided that they were going to try to put together a syndicated show like that. just exactly what you're saying, and see if they couldn't work it out of syndication out of here for the region first, and then ultimately, out all the way across the country. And they did start it. The concept behind it was not great, so I think that's where they got lost. And they did, but they will tell you that they had a hard time, which is bizarre, but they had a hard time getting people to come to Boston. We have an international airport.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have, it's crazy.
It's 4 hours from New York.
Well, that's the problem right there.
They'd
That's
rather
a
go to
big
New York.
part of it. They'd rather go to New York.
Yeah.
So they would have told you that they did have trouble, which is bizarre, isn't it? You know, but there have been a few things out of here, that have been national and have worked, but
Nothing that's stuck,
Nothing
though. And
that's stuck.
I don't know why.
Mel Robbins is the first one.
You took the words right out of my mouth. But that's because of the new dawn of what we have now, kind of what I was just asking you earlier.
Yeah.
We used to talk, like, there would be TV stations that come when we were doing the show at Jammin', and it'd be, everyone always had ideas. Nothing ever went concrete, but they were like, what about doing like what you guys are doing in the morning, like for late night TV? And I'm like, I'm in. Let's just try. I used to always be like, let's try it with minimal whatever. Let's just do it, because kind of like when you started doing the show on Fox, it's like, let's just start, and then along the way
it evolves.
Yeah, but let's just get going. But we never got to that point. And then even at one time, I was doing stuff for Nesson, and it was funny. The producer who brought me in, really good guy, but it was almost like your situation when you got to BZ. He brought me in, and he was, we went to lunch, and he was just like picking my brain for ideas, and I'm like, boom, game on. So I'm tossing crazy. I said, how about we do a show where you get me? I was pitching myself for every show. Of course. I said, you get me and one of the local athletes, and we talk about everything besides their sport. Right. Everything that we literally, everything they're into, but like if it's a football player, you're not allowed to talk about football. Like that's like literally the rule. Or how about this? How about we get a local athlete on or whatever? I'm an average sized dude. So like we'll do a segment where we're just measuring me versus a basketball player. Average size. Like I've always said, the Olympics should have an average person running each event so you can see how much better everyone else is. I'm like, so we'll do like an average sized person. I'll put on their shoes. I'll try on their pants, like things like that. I was giving him a million ideas, and he was like, well, we can't do that. But what if we just first bring you in and have you do for the Red Sox post-game show?
Yeah.
So I came in, and I was like, what do you want me to do? And he said, basically, whatever you want. So I'm like, great. So I was like, for my little segment, I'm going to go in and just do ridiculous things, to get attention, which he was cool with. But everybody else was very serious about the Red Sox post-game show.
Right.
So it was a hard sell, because I'd go to him. He's like, keep doing it. Then I would go to do it, and everybody around me was kind of like, no.
Stand there with their arms crossed.
Yeah. And so I would, I was trying to be cool with everybody, and I would go in and watch the games with them and stuff. And Jim Rice, God, I haven't seen Ness in forever. I don't know if he's still on there, but he was part of the post-game recap and stuff. And we hit it off really well, but we almost hit it off too well, where we would just be kind of joking during the games. So then I got pulled aside, and they said, well, Jim needs to watch the game. I'm like, I'm sorry that we're laughing and getting along too
Isn't
much.
Jim an adult?
I think the guy doesn't need to like examine the game to be able to talk about it after. But okay, so anyway, that was different. That lasted for a season.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm surprised it lasted for a season. I mean,
Well, they didn't bring me in for the entire season. They brought it lasted from when they brought me in until the end of that season.
Have you gotten the chance to meet Mel Robbins?
No, so I have not. And we're actually trying to get her on the podcast. She's on tour.
Yeah, she's on tour now.
And she and I have a mutual friend. And this is crazy. You know how these crazy things happen. I'm sitting with my mutual friend at a bar, and we're sitting there having a drink, and something comes up about Mel Robbins. Now, this is a friend of mine that I've had for a long, long time. And she says, yeah, when I was at Mel's house a couple of weeks ago. And I said, what? I said, what are you? She goes, Kim, that Mel's daughter and my daughter were college roommates, and we've known each other for years and years. And I'm like, I have been chasing this woman around the world. Absolutely, I've become such a nuisance for her, and my producer even more so than I. And, trying to get her on. And I'm sitting next to somebody who was at her house 2 weeks ago, and that is one of my very best friends. So the long and short of it is that we together are working to
Something's
get her.
cooking.
So I hope, sometime here soon. She's on tour.
Yeah.
So
I think I would tune into that. I feel like you and her, that'd be a fun little thing.
I think it would. And to be honest with you, I want to pick Mel's brain. I want to know how she did what she's done in the short amount of time that she's done it. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do. We all know that, and you can put on a great product and you can do great things, and there's some kind of magic. There's some fairy dust that she somehow, tapped into. And so I want to try to see what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, don't we all, right?
I think with her, with just like a lot of people now online, you listen to different podcasts or see different people. There's a lot of things that like, it's almost like ideas I always had in my head, but they're doing an unbelievable job of verbalizing it and explaining it to people. Yeah. Like her, I remember there was just times that whenever I'd be like anxious about doing something or whatever it could be. I mean, it could have been freaking getting my blood taken at the doctor's or going to like an interview, whatever it was. I'd be like, well, it's going to happen no matter what. So just like, all right. It's time to go. Just go do it. And then listen to Mel Robbins and she's like, just count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and take the action. Things like that. Or with, her let them theory. I used to call it compartmentalizing people. And everyone's like, what do you mean? I said, listen, there's some people that you work with that you wouldn't hang out with after work. I said, I have a ton of friends who we laugh, we get along, we can hang out all night, but I would never want to work with them.
Sure.
I have people who I think are very intelligent, but they're not creative. I know people who are very creative, but they're not necessarily like book smart. I said, I just compartmentalize.
Right.
And, it's like, I like this about that person. I like this about that person. And I kind of let them do whatever it is that I don't agree with.
Let them do it.
And let them.
You hit the nail on the head, though. She has an ability to verbalize what I think all of us are thinking. She has, it's not rocket science, what
right.
she says or what she has come up with. She's a wordsmith, number one, and she's very verbal. Mm-hmm. She's great,
And she explains it in real world scenario type of situations.
I think, part of that's probably the kind of attorney that she was and, her ability, her gift of gab there, and her sensibility related to that. But I think that she's somebody who's not afraid to show her true colors. And I think that people can see through, those who put up a fence and those who don't, a wall and those who don't. And I think Mel can really just kind of strip it down, and people love that about her,
Yeah.
So good stuff. But yeah, she's a local legend now, right?
Yeah. I take that back. I would love her on Carrigan and Company for you. I would love to see you on her show, though. I think that I would love the deep dive on that, because I think there's a lot about your story when you were talking. There were so many sub-genres that I was like, that must have been really tough. That must have been really tough.
Yeah.
That must have been really, just to give you an example, the concept of being a woman at that time, 8 months pregnant, getting that rug pulled under from you, getting the press not smearing, but you know what I mean, like your name hot in the press. Obviously we don't have to, but I think Mel would be a perfect person to break that down with and really zoom in on how tough that must have been for you during that time. Because a lot of women have to go through things like that us men, we're kind of privileged. We don't have to carry a child and have that stress and have that expectation to achieve. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Well, I do, totally. And I will and by the way, that's very observant of you, because, I don't... There was a lot of that associated with it, because we do also believe that we always believed, and that was part of why I got the cease and desist. It really wasn't me; it was my agent. He came out full board that this woman is 8 months pregnant, and this is not about her salary. This is about the fact that this will be baby number 2, and he doesn't like that. And when you looked around and you saw the women who worked around me and worked in Miami, very few of them were moms. Very few of them had that responsibility. And I'd always felt pretty strongly about the idea that your allegiance is here, not there. And I don't think that I was ever somebody who lost sight of what I was responsible for at work. But, I think any woman will tell you, you start having babies and you do shift your thinking somewhat. Yeah. And in retrospect, I could tell you now, I would have rather it all went down the way it did, because I was in places where I could take care of my kids. That was first and foremost, always. But that was a part of it. There is no two ways. That's why the New York Times wrote about it. And the New York Times said, this is a pregnant woman who has, for no cause, has been let go except one, that she's standing there with a big baby bump. Mm-hmm. But I will tell you that after it happened to me and all the swirling and the drama that was associated with it, I remember trying, number one, to keep my 4-year-old balanced so mom wasn't crying and mom wasn't, beside herself, and I was. And I'd go and get in the shower by myself and stand in the shower and cry because I couldn't figure out what was going to happen and why this had happened. And I was obviously very emotional because I was pregnant, and, so I wasn't real reasonable to begin with. By the way, I didn't turn my hair red when I was pregnant. I just want you to know. But it was tough, and I recognized that I was, and I at the time I couldn't say that. I couldn't say it. My agent could say it. I could not.
What year was this?
So Gracie was born in 2001, so it was early 2001.
Wow. Yeah, and this is back when stories would last. If that happened now, it would be something. Right. It would be in the news on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday you'd forget about it.
Yeah. Because you wouldn't have. I mean, I've often tried to explain to people what happened when that happened. I never in my life would have thought it went down the way it did. I mean, I had radio stations from all across the country calling me, and because this was a big deal, because again, I was this major market main news anchor in a number one station with everything right except one thing. I was standing there with a baby bump.
That's crazy.
So it was really crazy, and it was tough. And if you can believe this, you guys, the people at the station there and whatever, I mean, nobody saw this coming, and they had a meeting about it at the station. And Ed Anson got up in front of the entire staff, something that could never happen now, and said, "Don't worry about Kim. Her husband has a great job." That's true.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So that was, that's just some of the changes that have happened, right, since then.
Wow.
He would never have been able to get up and say such a thing
I have
now.
no words. That is just disgusting.
Yeah, he did.
Do you still have that New York Times article?
I do somewhere. I
think we got to frame that.
Yeah, at the time we cut out, after I got a little bit of thought, when I could get a little reasonable, and went and had the baby, which, by the way, it did ultimately throw me into labor too early and all that kind of stuff.
Really?
But so when I did finally have Gracie and calm things down, and we were negotiating out with CBS, I started realizing, this is something that I really should keep. We need to keep track of. We need to know all the things that have happened here and whatever. And so my husband was really good about it and kept a lot of the stuff. So
yeah,
maybe a T-shirt. Just the article right there.
Well, at the time I would have liked to have had a T-shirt that said "I survived Ed," but
I know, literally.
I decided maybe that wasn't.
You monetize the narrative.
There you go.
How many kids do you have?
I have 2.
2 kids?
Yeah, I have 2. So 28 and 24. Going to be 24 next month. Yeah.
What tips do you have for a career woman?
Yeah.
High profile.
Yeah. I got to tell
kids.
you, talk about compartmentalizing. For all of my career, that was what I did. I actually compartmentalized Kim. So Randy and I always felt really strongly. I mean, we're Midwestern kids, we grew up in the Midwest.
Yeah.
We weren't going to hire someone who lived in our house and took care of our kids. Nobody else was going to raise those kids. Those are our kids, So that was a challenge. I was a nighttime anchor. So I had to sleep in the mornings, and Randy I'd get home at 12:30, quarter to 1, and Randy'd still be up with AJ, and then he'd go to bed and I'd stay up, and then I'd go to bed, and then we did have to have somebody come in the mornings, because I had to have help. I had to sleep because I'd have to be back there at 11, doing it again at 11 o'clock the next night. And TV there's no room for nights up, it's just not. So it was challenging, but I would compartmentalize, and I would say, today I have to be Kim, the TV news anchor, because I've got this luncheon and I've got this and I've got that and whatever. And then on other days, I'm going to be Randy Carrigan's wife because he needs me to attend this function, and then I'd have to be the kid's mom, because I'd go to school and be the room mom and do all those things. And I really tried to make sure that people didn't talk about that, because the kids were like,
well, that's all they know.
Yeah.
People ask me that. They're like, what do your kids think about you being on the radio? I'm like, that's all.
They don't, right. It's mom's job.
Right.
They have much more appreciation for it now.
Yeah.
Then they were just like, Mom, why is everybody talking to us? That kind of thing. Of course, they did have the advantages of it too.
Yeah.
When the Celtics won the championship back in whatever, and AJ came to the station, and Big Baby Davis and Paul Pierce are standing there. All of a sudden, you realize, wow, those long conversations at the grocery store were worth it. Because, wow, check this out. So.
Did your husband, when he got with you and you started talking to him about your aspirations and stuff, I'm sure he was like, hey, I'm down to go wherever. But what were his goals before he met you? Did he just want to be a lawyer in Missouri?
Well, no. I got to tell you. So Rand and I met in college. We're college sweethearts. He was a bartender and a Phi Delta, and I was, sorority life, and oh boy, so we had that whole thing, right?
What night did you meet? What happened?
Yeah. So listen, I met him because he was a bartender, and I figured it out really, really quickly that if you flirt with the bartender, chances are good you get free drinks. So a little flirting went on there, but this is a crazy story. You just never know where life's going to take you. So my junior year of college, I went to the University of Missouri.
Yeah.
Bunch of my sorority sisters, we all went spring break in down to Fort Lauderdale. And there was like 7 or 8 of us staying in one room. That's what you did, right? So we're in the room, and we'd been at the pool all day or whatever, and the bars and whatever. And so we go back to the room, and we had seen a bunch of guys from Missouri there. And we said, we're going to go back to our room. We're going to have a party there. Our room is a third of the size of this studio, right? And now we're going to have a party in our room. And I remember that these guys all came in, and there was this guy, and he was across the room. And I remember seeing him so clearly across the room, and I did not know him, but I just thought he was interesting. Well, that's Randy Carrigan. And who would have ever known that sitting across the room from me at that point was my future husband, my whole life, my whole world, my kid's dad. You never, ever know.
Yeah.
And I can see him so clearly to this day across the room.
And you guys just you didn't really interact that night? You just...
No.
What?
No. Yeah, went back to school, then I saw him, he was a bartender, and I was like, I gotta get to know that guy, whatever. And so...
I can't believe that you guys were in Florida for spring break and you're like, hey, let's go party with these guys from Missouri. You should get them from a different state.
They stick with what they know.
That is so small town. That is so small town.
Isn't it, though?
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I think, too, I think came into your benefit being from the Midwest as well, especially at the time you were on air. I think there's this weird pipeline between Midwest Southern people and East Coast, old school East Coast people, because although it's a big city and things are moving and the times are a bit different, I think the morals are the exact same.
I think you're right.
I think in the Midwest, maybe even now, it's a bit more still upfront.
Yeah.
But I think it's like your parents over here. It's like your parents or your grandmother or whatever. That's how they were raised. So it reminds them of something familial. Does that make sense?
It's 100% right. You've hit the nail on the head. I mean, Brandon and I have found that through the years, that we could really relate to people here. But I think that's Boston. Maybe not so much in some of the other areas. Like, I'm not so sure if we lived in Philly that it would be the same gig. But that is so true.
And what was that like to being in Missouri? Like, take me back, like pre-college, like high school. I don't want to say fascinating. Like you're some exhibit. I'm like so like cool to think about. But like I always find it fascinating people who grow up in a smaller area or like in the Midwest and the South, and they take the jump and they take the leap.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you, when I go back now, when Brandon and I go back, all of our family's still there. And when we go back, we really do see the dramatic difference. Mm-hmm. Life is very slow. That's the first thing. Randy absolutely is. He has become a masshole driver. And so we go back there, and he is a New Yorker on his horn. It's absolutely outrageous. I'm always like, what are you doing? But it's, it was a great place to grow up, and it was the only thing I knew, obviously, And I never want to offend my relatives there because it will always be my home. And my kids will tell you, and it's never been their home, but they feel like it's their second home because grandparents are there, everybody's there, And they will tell you that they don't want to live there, but that they are shocked by the fact that people are so friendly and helpful. You go to the grocery store and you go out to put your groceries into your trunk. And for me, and a man will walk up and go, "Can I help you, or can I take that cart back?" And this is somebody out in the parking lot. This isn't somebody who works at the store.
Somebody who's never been there will be like, police!
This is it, exactly. Yeah. Right? Get away from my purse, and you're trying to take my bags. It's a very different lifestyle. It's a very conservative lifestyle, which it wasn't when I was younger, which makes it very different too.
Yeah.
But when Rand and I made this leap, we knew that we would be better suited for big city life on the East Coast than the West Coast. For exactly what you're saying. The West Coast was very, just sort of catch as catch can, and it just had a different vibe than what we knew. Whereas we knew out here, this would be closer to what we knew as home. And it has been, and it's been a great, and now, my kids are from here, so now we're here from here. That's all there is to it. They don't live here in Boston, but it's their home, and so it's our home now. But
are your kids still living here, or they work?
No, both of my kids live in Manhattan.
No way.
Yeah, I got my oldest is a Wall Streeter. Okay. And AJ and Gracie works in the fashion world.
Very nice.
Yeah. So, and they afford us a really cool experience all the time. They live down there, and we go and see them a lot, and it's great because I have them both in one place. I could have ended up with Grace. Who knows where she would. We always knew AJ would be in New York, but we didn't know where Grace would end up. So that's been great, and we go down there and just, it's so cool to experience New York with people who live there.
Right.
It's a totally different thing.
How long's your son been a Wall Streeter?
He started with the Wall Street firm. AJ trades options. He's a trader, and he started at 24.
Yeah.
And he now is a CFA. He now works for Stifel, the big investment bank, and he pretty much runs their options desk. And
do you sense any burnout in him?
Not yet.
Yeah.
But it's.
I feel like a lot of dudes will do that, and they go hard because they're in their early mid-20s, and then hit a stage in their life where they're almost like, I don't want to keep doing this, and then transition to something else. Like we had Andrew in here who does Haymakers for Hope. He was killing it doing Wall Street stuff, and then one day he was like, no more.
Right.
And just changed it.
I think, so he is a CFA, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
It's 3 different tests. It takes most people 2 years in between the tests. AJ decided, I just got to get this done before, maybe I'm married or kids or whatever. So he took 3 tests in right at 3 years while he was working. So, he's my kid and I'm bragging about him, but it is a pretty big deal to do. But what's great about having that for him is that when he burns out, he can go and, he can be a venture capitalist. He can do something else. He can start his own gig. And I think eventually that probably will be the direction he goes.
Yeah.
Or, he could be a money manager. He could do something like that. But it is cutthroat. He, for a 28-year-old, he's done well. He does well.
Yeah.
But you do pay the price, and I do believe that ultimately you can be burnt out on this pretty quick.
Yeah.
And he's watched a lot of guys who are already around him, older guys, guys in their 40s and whatever, that you get addicted to the money so you can't step away. And those old, the Wolf of Wall Street doesn't exist exactly anymore, but there's a generation that's a little bit older that still plays those games to a certain extent. So
yeah.
What about you? What's next for Kim Carrigan?
Kim Carrigan is the podcast, obviously, and I do have a radio show that's over on another radio network. I worked for Bloomberg for 5 years, so I did radio and TV for those guys, and so I have a little bit of business in my background. So I have the other radio show is a business show, and then I have another business show in Minneapolis.
Really?
I do out of my house, with a co-host who's in Minneapolis, which is bizarre, I realize. So all of that's great, and then I speak a lot, and I do a lot of stuff like that, because I can now, and I can do whatever I want to do. But I don't know. I'm not finished.
I was going to say, I sense a renaissance coming.
Yeah, I'm not finished, and the podcast is awesome. I love it. Because you just can do whatever you want.
It's so much fun doing stuff like that. Yeah. And coming from, you did the morning show at Fox, so you did kind of experience that a little bit in the news world. But the old news world was very, you presented the news, you did your, let's have a quick conversation going into commercials to show that we're friends, but you kind of had to stick to a certain format and script. That's why when you started doing that morning show, I bet you were probably like, well, this is kind of cool. We can kind of almost rib each other a little bit and be a little looser.
When I started that show, the management there, their biggest fear for me was, can her skills, can they transfer? And can she comfortably not read a teleprompter and talk to somebody with, a level of intelligence?
Yeah.
And I worried. I was like, I don't know. I think I can. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess we'll find out, And by the way, talking to somebody with a level of intelligence is one thing like this, and it's another when a camera's in your face and the light is on. That's what can you do it then. But that's why I don't miss television at this point, because once you've done that, you really don't go back. You can't go back. And,
right.
Some of my friends will tell you it's been tougher for them to go back because that morning show was not replicated after it went off and after they changed it. They don't do that anymore. Those,
right.
Interviews, and they've gone back to the days of reading the prompter and
which
smiling at the sports guy.
I used to host community auditions, which was like
oh yeah.
It was like it was like American Idol hit with a shrink ray.
Yeah.
Very regional and all that stuff. And at one point, one of my co-hosts, her name was Christina Acura, really, really nice girl, but she came from news. And they would have stuff for us on the prompter, and she would get upset at me because I would never read the prompter. And she was like, I don't know when I'm supposed to go because you're not reading what's on the prompter. And I said, I don't do prompters, Christina.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we should do that to make it easier. And I said, no, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to help you by never reading the prompter and just sometimes randomly throwing things at you. And she would, we were cool, but she wouldn't get mad, she wouldn't talk to me, but she would we'd finish doing something and she'd be like, why do you do that to me? And I go, I'm ultimately helping you.
Right.
And then after a while, we didn't need the prompter anymore.
Yep.
Yeah, you want to adapt.
Yeah,
and she just wanted the whole thing. And I said, it's more natural when we're just BSing. Oh, what's the worst that's going to happen? We're going to flub a word? Fine, keep talking. It's like when you're having a conversation with someone.
Well, I'll tell you, when you are addicted to a teleprompter, you know, it is hard to step away from it and have your own thoughts.
Yeah.
It's
a direct line. You know what I mean? It's like nothing can go wrong. My eyes are right here.
Right.
You know?
Well, and I got to tell you, when in the very beginning, my biggest fear was always that I would say something that I regretted. You know, you do have to build a certain amount. See, you radio guys don't get this. You have to build a certain amount of confidence that what you're saying is smart and that you do mean what you're saying. You know, because you've read somebody else's words for so long, you know. So it's weird. But anyway, so I do love the podcast. I think that's really great and I love it. But I'm always kind of looking for one more thing, you know. I don't know. I mean, I still love TV. Mm-hmm. I just wouldn't want to go back to news.
Yeah, not doing it the way it's being done right now. Right.
I mean, if there was something, you know, when you're saying you were over pitching those guys and whatever.
Oh my God.
You know, I think to myself, wow, you know, if I had something I really wanted to do, I just don't know what that is. But if I had a great idea, I'd pitch it. Yeah. You know, to see. But I don't know. You got any ideas for me?
I have plenty. I'm like, the brain's already stirring right now. I don't want to say them out loud though, because what if they start cooking? You know?
Do it, man. What do you got?
No, I think you know what I like about you that I think is missing nowadays. Back to what I was saying about like New England, Boston not having that sort of syndicated thing.
Yeah.
There's no like turning something on and feeling like you're talking to a friend or like feeling like this person gets whatever. And I think you have that. I think you remind me of someone like Mel. You remind me of someone who, like, obviously, I don't want to say back in the day, but you are the epitome of the golden age of Boston news because it's like people feel like they know you.
Right.
And we're no disrespect to any current Boston news anchors, but it's like it's not the same. And I think many people would have that opinion. So I'd love to see you. I mean, it doesn't have to be TV, streaming, whatever. I'd love to just see you get that other opportunity.
Yeah. Well, you know, we've talked about the idea of taking the podcast. So the podcast Carrigan and Company. So the idea for those who are listening and don't know about it, you know, so the idea is that every week somebody is a co-host, so that each week sort of the you know, the vibe in the room just changes. It's like you. I mean, you bring somebody else in who talks about something completely different. You were the co-host at one point, but the show is done more like a TV show than it is, and that's just based on my background. But I think that could be a TV show.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, bring in guests, and you got the co-host who helps interview and talk to it and brings their thing to it. And I think it could be sharpened up for a TV show. Mm-hmm. It's funny when you said, I pitched the idea of bringing in athletes but never talking about their sport. You know, we have talked about that. We should bring in people but never talk about what it is they do.
Right.
Learn something different about them than what they do. And I do think that would be a good TV show. And I think that if a local would pick it up, a regional show like that would be great, because there's a lot of people that people would love to hear from.
Yeah.
And would love to see. And
ring a buzzer. If they start talking about whatever their thing is,
yeah, literally.
Nope. Yeah. You're not allowed to talk about cooking, chef.
Yeah, literally.
Right, exactly. So Romero, let's go do it.
Seriously, I'm down.
You and I'll do it. We don't have to. We don't have to have different co-hosts. It'll just be you and me, and then we'll bring in different people. And
yeah, I think that's what we need. That's what we need.
It'll be fun.
I mean, with so many streaming services and all that stuff, every now and then I'll see things and I'm like, that is such a terrible idea. Howard's like,
Kim, do it yourself. Be your own boss. Like, seriously, in this day, like, I promise you, you don't, no disrespect to anyone, you don't need any big studio backing. Invest in yourself. I really do think you could take something to the next level. Seriously.
Well, that is so nice of you. Yeah. Thank you.
She could do it, but you know what it is? There's a lot of like, sometimes you like having people to take care of the headache work.
Of
like
course.
To call it.
Yeah.
Eventually you will, but I really do think you could set that to sail and it would strike very fast.
That's the part. I need, you know, we have this experience with the podcast, and we're really lucky because the podcast has a lot of sponsors and we really appreciate them. And, you know, but that's the part that I don't, I mean, I never in my life sold anything. Yeah. You know. I just had to sell. Well, I sold the station every day, but you know,
and you sold yourself.
I sold Kim.
But
yeah,
that's different.
It is different,
Yeah.
you know. And
I'm trying to
sometimes I
sell a
wasn't
movie,
really great
Kim.
at
It's
that.
not easy. I'm trying to sell a movie.
Are you?
That's what we were talking about on the way in. I had a really bad meeting, and I was just like, "Oh, God."
Sorry.
So yeah, I understand. I can't even imagine.
But
Well, maybe I
gonna-
know some people. We'll talk off the
No,
air.
he's gonna. What's good about Moose is that he has that old school persistence.
Yeah,
thing
good.
where a lot of people. He's 25 years old. A lot of people his age, they try something twice, don't get what they want, and go, forget it. The world doesn't love me. I'm a victim. Forget it.
Right. There's so many no's, and it's and no is hard, man. It's hard. I don't care who you are.
Especially when it comes to creative stuff, because there's like
so much of your heart is in it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we're in a business where you can't, like on a piece of paper, you can't put down this plus this equals this. You know what I'm saying? It's like you have this vision of a certain thing. Like we all get motivated by different things. You know, for you it might be a movie. For you it might be a song that gets your juices going or whatever.
Absolutely.
And it's not like, you know, it's not like you're going in and working at a car factory drilling holes in doors.
Right, exactly.
Where it's like, if I drill 50 holes in a half hour, I'm one of the better guys.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, I mean, it's personal.
Yeah.
Because it's part of who you are. Yeah.
I'll make this really brief. What I was about to tell you, I got lucky to get into someone's assistant answered me back.
This is the story you told me when we walked into Kim this morning.
Right when we were walking in. They emailed me back, and I was telling him earlier, I cast my net as far as I can go. Like, I'm emailing someone's assistant, director, whatever. I don't even know at this point who I'm emailing anymore. It's just like cold pitch email. Whoever answers, great. I don't know how this person, it might have been by a mistake. Someone got back to me, and they said, so-and-so isn't available until Wednesday, last Wednesday. I was like, okay, great. Like, whatever time, I will make it work.
Right.
Like, whatever works for them. And then they got back, and they were like, okay, 3 o'clock West Coast time. So I was like, all right, 6 o'clock Moose, like, whatever. So I called the number that they gave me. Mind you, I don't know what company this is yet, nothing, because they didn't give me a name. The girl answers, and she's like, so-and-so Paramount. I was like, hi, yeah, I have a meeting with so-and-so right now. Like, okay, yeah, then they transfer me over, and they get on the phone, and they're super nice. Hi, yes, oh my goodness, I loved your sample. It was amazing. Tell me a bit about yourself, and we're chit-chatting, and it's like really positive. And she's like, okay, give me your log line. Like, what is it about? Give me a bit more of like a detail. And we have like a quick 6-minute conversation where I'm breaking everything down to her, like the really fast version of the film. She goes, oh my God, we need more of this in Hollywood. We need more human stories about connection. It's all these big blockbusters. This is exactly what... Oh my God, I just realized I said the company's name. I was gonna leave Paramount out of this. Paramount, whatever. They were like, this is exactly what we need. Oh my gosh, yeah. She's like, hold on, I'm gonna look you up. I didn't get a chance to like go over your stuff yet. And then she goes, how many Instagram followers do you have? And I was like, huh? And then she's like, how many Instagram followers do you have? And I can hear her typing. I was like, oh, I don't know off the top of my head. And I'm assuming she pulled me up. She was like, oh, okay. She's like, what about your TikTok following? Like, have you been discussing this film? And I was like, no. I was like, you know how it is. Like, you can't really put out you never know who's going to hear it, take it, whatever, copyright. Someone that has more money than me will jump on the idea. Like, you have to be really careful on what it's not like a song. Yeah. Where I can go and put out a song and it's it's like a film concept or an idea can, like that, it's gone.
Right.
And I'm like, assuming she would know this, and she's just like, okay, and when it comes to casting, like, what are we thinking? And I said my idea, and she was like, yeah, no. That person had like one good thing. You know, there's this influencer who has like, I think like 8 million followers, and she kept going back to social media.
Yeah.
And I was getting so red at this point. I was like, don't feed into this. You already know. I was like, just don't feed into this. Anyways, to end the story, basically her reasoning was, I did not have a big enough social media following. Even if I wanted to be attached to it, the film would never sell. Even if a big production company picked it up, no one would go see it. It doesn't have a big name to it. It's not an action movie. It's not this. It's not that. But I'm like, you just spent the first 10 minutes of this conversation
saying how great it was.
Telling me how amazing this story is. Then you tell me I don't have a social media following. Why? Then you say to me, we would have to attach someone who has a big enough social media following. They've never acted, never have any experience, just because they have a following. she ended the conversation by going, I would really go on TikTok and like, you can do a lot of stuff on your own and you can like film. You should start doing some short films. And then right before I said bye, she was like, you know what? Good luck with everything. Before I even said bye, she hung up.
Wow. I don't. There was a day when social media was not the driving force of every single solitary thing that happens in the world. I mean, talent is talent, and does Paramount not have a social media following? How about that? Right? Isn't
I was just like, yeah.
Well, listen, maybe what you do need to do is consider like a smaller house, a local house. And I happen to know somebody who owns one, and she's making her first movie right now, and maybe that would be somebody to connect you to.
Have
you talked to anybody local?
I've talked with locals just on the creative side, kind of hearing their story and and what they've done and things like that. But in terms of that, no.
Okay.
But yeah, that's what I had to deal with last Wednesday, and I was like, I
can't
crazy
stand
story.
that. I feel like that's what's held me back in my career a little bit. Is that I have like a finite amount of playing the BS game in me, and every day it changes. So like if I'm having a conversation with somebody, and they're playing that the game, it's just like the game I call it. I'm like, all right, can we skip to the part where we're real humans? Because I can't do. I've done it. I've talked to people. I've gone into interviews that I didn't know were interviews, and I know I didn't get the thing because
I didn't know that's why I was even here.
I did one. I interviewed at MTV. I didn't even know it was in. Remember the Inside Track?
Oh yeah,
it was in the Inside Track. There used to be like a gossip column in the Herald, and somebody invited me to go to MTV. And I forget what they said. And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. I'll drive to New York. I went. I was BSing with the person. And because I think they were asking me questions like in that way. And I was just kind of like, no, I mean, I was just being, I think, way too casual.
Yeah.
I think that's what kills me sometimes. It's like I don't do enough of the
game.
The game, yeah. And sure enough, it was in the Inside Track. Ramiro went to audition for MTV or whatever. I'm like, I did? I thought I was just talking to somebody at MTV or whatever.
You could have been a VJ.
Yeah, I could have been a VJ. This is back when TRL was the thing. I could have been Carson Daly. Then another time I had a friend who worked at GBH, and she had me come do some stuff with her. And then one day she said, oh, you should talk to one of our whoever it was. I went in the office, and I'm having a conversation with the lady, and she goes, let me ask you something. You have your image is a little more loose and edgy, and what was the word? They say you have blue humor, and what would you bring if you were delivering a more of a high-end news story? And I'm like, I said,
why would I be delivering a high-end news story?
Right. This is like, I didn't know that she was like talking to me about a position. And I said, well, I mean, I think people in this day and age are smart enough to be able to separate and go, hey, when he's doing this, which is more of a fun, off-the-cuff type of show, he's got this personality. But if he's talking about this and he needs to be more serious, I can separate. I think people are smart enough to be able to separate that I'm doing two different things. And I don't think she liked the way I answered it because I kind of said it just like that, where I'm like, that's a stupid question. People are not fucking dumb. And then later on, my friend said to me, she goes, yeah, you didn't do good in that interview. And I was like, what interview?
Yeah, right.
I didn't know I was doing an interview.
Well, first, it's too bad you couldn't have said to her, well, you're highbrow audience that apparently has
she might not have used the word highbrow,
maybe they would understand the difference
in that type of way. I was kind of like, huh?
Yeah.
I'm like, if I'm talking about a serious news story, can I be serious? Is that what you're asking me? Yes, I can.
They're an interesting group over there. I was they brought me over for a spot, and I spent like 2.5, 3 weeks there doing this show for them, and in the end I was too commercial. He's like, okay, I don't know what to say to that.
Yeah. Too many people know me.
Yeah,
recognizable.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, too professional.
Too commercial.
You want me to dumb it down a little bit?
I just didn't get it. Yeah, so I was just like, all right,
it's crazy.
That's okay. You're not made for everybody.
Yeah.
That's one thing you do learn over time, right? You're not made for everybody. Don't let those people, though, upset you about your social media.
Oh, no.
There are ways around that.
I was more upset that this is the point we've gone to.
Well, so true.
That's what I was upset about.
Yeah, craziness.
And then you got to remember, people are people. So there might be somebody else who's working there who would have answered the phone and been completely different with you. They would have gotten, you know what I mean? They would have been more on your.
The thing that always bothers me is that, oh, this is great, this is great, this is great, until I figure out actually you're not great for me, and so this doesn't work. I can't. That's just so terrible.
Oh, it's
that whole idea that she thought it was great until I didn't get a chance to look at your stuff. Let me look at that while I'm on the phone. Oh,
yeah.
Well, maybe this isn't going to go the way I thought it was.
Which is so just.
Yeah.
It's the game, man. It's annoying.
It is the game.
Yeah.
It's annoying it's annoying because when you know it's being done and they know it's being done and you know they know it's being and you're like, can we just skip to the part where we talk like people?
I'd rather tell me you didn't like my story. Right. Tell me you thought it was crap. Tell me, you know what I mean?
I got a feeling she did like your story, though. I don't think that was the issue.
But it was because I don't have like what?
Yeah.
Am I selling a product or am I selling a film? You know
what she should have told you up front is we don't invest
exactly
in this kind of thing.
Yes.
We can guide you and help you, and then if you can get it off the ground, then we invest.
And I've been told that, and I prefer that. Yeah. I'm just don't even waste my time. Don't get my mind going. Just say right off the bat, no, thank you.
Right.
Nope.
And you're not far enough into the gig. We can't take it on.
Thank you.
You're not a finished product, so it's not like you're going in there and going, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Take it or leave it. It's like, let's talk here.
Right.
Yeah.
Help me out. I haven't done this before.
Which is crazy because it's like that is, in my head, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like not like a low investment. Risk is here, honestly, with like the investing in a new talent like that. Opportunity for them to make money and not pay me a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's like, I'm like, does no one think that? They're like, all right, like we're in a day and age of streaming. If we enjoy the concept that the person has created, low investment, let's have a meeting. Let's like play out the things. Let's play out the cards. Let's see where it goes. You get what I'm just saying?
Absolutely.
That's all I have to say on that.
But have you guys, this is totally, it's on the subject but off. Have you guys watched the show Studio?
No, but I've heard it's awesome.
That's the one with Jennifer Aniston and stuff?
No.
It's on
this
Apple.
Yeah. It's, who's the star? Anyway, watch it because as you were telling that story, I'm going, oh my gosh, this is playing out right before my eyes. It's a comedy.
I'm
can
thinking
be very
morning show.
dark.
I know what okay.
You're talking about the morning show. Yeah, Studio.
And you know what's so funny? As you were talking the entire time, you are reminding me of someone in the film.
In your film?
Yeah.
Would you like me to do it?
Do you act?
No, but I can. Yeah. I also don't sing, but I'd love to have a singing part.
It takes place in.
He also doesn't direct yet. So.
Yeah, I don't direct either. Yeah, exactly.
My God, this is a winner.
It takes place in 1960 South Carolina.
Oh, really? Oh, I love it. I can get that Southern accent.
There we go.
Written by a 25-year-old kid from Revere.
Listen,
did not live through the 60s and has never been to South Carolina.
I've never been to South Carolina, exactly.
All right. Okay, Kim, I got some random questions for you.
All right, love.
What is something that you wish you were better at?
I wish I was better with people's names. I think it's been a real weakness in my life. I'm not joking. You know, when you get too far in and then you realize.
Yeah, and you can't ask at this point.
I know. And I've had embarrassing moments. Oh, horrible.
And I'll do the thing where it's like you shake hands, they tell you their name, you repeat their name to them. You even mention it at another point.
Me too.
And the second that you release, you're like, oh my God, what was their name?
Me too. My husband and I have a game. This is my husband, Randy.
Oh, yeah.
And, because if I haven't said this is, Jane Smith, and, there's always those jerks now who are onto that. So they're like, hi, Randy. Thank you. So,
that's so funny. Okay, if you could time travel to the past or the future, only to observe.
Yep.
Which way are you going? What do you want to see?
I'm going forward, and I'm going forward because of my kids.
Okay.
Because I want to see. I've been to the past.
Yeah.
I'm going forward because I want to see. My prayer always is that life for 25-year-olds is good in the future.
Yep.
And I see a bunch of stuff that we're doing right now that's crappy, and I worry about it. So I want to time travel in hopes that when I get there, I see that it all worked out and it's good for you guys. I want it to be good. young people today, they got it tough, man. Life is tough. Social media is tough.
Yeah.
It's just, and I don't want to sound like some old person, but because I deal with social media too, but these guys have it tough, and I want them to start to skate somewhere. I don't know. So.
Well, it's tougher because you can't. I do a good job of, like, I don't let stuff bother me, whether it's a comment section, but I see people that it bothers, and I always say, then I go, listen, growing up, if there was a bully, what do? You avoid the bully. If you didn't want to punch him in the face. Yeah. Don't go down that street. Don't avoid where the bully is.
Don't let him drag in.
It's hard now because of social media. I could easily, personally, be like, I'll delete that app or whatever, but I see adults who can't do it. So I can't even imagine a young kid who that's all they know. They're probably sitting there like stewing, like, I got to see what people are saying about me.
That's it. It's it. Their lives are being dictated by a whole bunch of people who are big heroes because they're unknown, anonymous heroes, who on social media are living their best life. Everybody's living their best life on social media,
right.
So nobody knows that you had to turn your hair red.
The big Kim existential crisis. Redhead. A skill you wish you could have, like if you could wake up tomorrow with a brand new skill.
I'm telling you, I would be a singer. I tell this to everybody. Yes, I that is, if I have one regret in my life, it's that I'm not a singer. And I'm just taken by singers. I love music. So, and it's not that I necessarily have a genre I want to sing. I just wish I could sing. And I cannot sing.
Okay.
So that's it.
Favorite quote?
That's so shallow, isn't it? I wish I was a singer. Other people are like, well, I wish that I could solve cancer problems. No, not me. I just want to be a singer. My favorite quote. Oh, gosh. I don't know. I don't know if I really have a favorite quote.
Something from your dad. Hit me. Your dad sounds like such a smart dude. He does.
Well, my dad says a lot of stuff, but his favorite is a body in motion stays in motion.
It's
which
true.
He's 100% right. There's no two ways about that.
It is. I always, when I argue with people, not argue, but whenever, there's the people who are like, oh, there you go, exercising every day, eating. Look at you, not having this. And whenever, again, I play the game up to a certain point, and then I'm like, all right, fine. How about this? How about you explain to me one negative side effect of being healthier?
Right.
Explain to me how being healthier is a worse thing. You can't. My sister and I argue all the time. She goes, look at you, I'll probably outlive you anyway. And I said, you might. But you know what? Here's the deal. From now until you're 80 or 85, you're going to be in and out of the doctor's office. There's a bunch of stuff you won't be able to do. Your quality of life is going to suck. And if I die at 70, it's going to be awesome. I'm going to be freaking exercising, hiking. I'm going to take up surfing at like 65. Yeah, always.
It's so true. It is so true. I mean, Dad was right. If you go into a bad situation healthier than the rest, chances are good you're going to get to the other side. Dave McGilvery. You know who Dave
we had him on a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Dave's story. I mean, this guy's getting ready for another Ironman.
Yeah.
When he feels tightness in his chest and he's got like 95% blockage. A guy who's run how many marathons? And I think he's done 10 Ironmans.
Yeah.
Goes in, gets it taken care of, gets himself healthy, and gets that Ironman done. And now has run how many other marathons since? And
and he's in his 70s.
Bad things happen to you, but if you're on the other, if you're healthier, you can get there.
Life is gonna life, but you want to say. I like to call it. I heard someone say this one time, and I'm like, that's perfect. It's you want to increase your surface area of good luck.
Right.
It's like
that's it.
Things are gonna happen, but if you're much more prepared, it's like getting up early in the morning and starting your day with whatever your routine is versus hitting the snooze button 10 times. Starting off late, and then all of a sudden you get a flat, and you're like, Jesus Christ, my day's ruined. And it's like, well, I mean, if you're...
Can I tell you something? The one advice, you said you have young people. What's your one advice? One thing I've always told my kids, I don't think they do it, but they should. When you put your feet on the floor, turn around and make your bed, because if you don't accomplish anything else the rest of the day, you made your bed.
Yep. No, it's so true. It's so true.
I mean, it's just sort of a,
Yeah.
If you look at it for the big picture, it really makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any questions for me? We're going to start doing this now, Moose. This is the guys last week.
Oh, God. My question for you is, how long are you going to do this?
How long am I going to do
Yeah.
it? Well,
You going to stay?
He said, well.
Yeah. I mean, that's a tough question to ask when you're sitting in front of a mic that belongs to somebody else, I know. But
yeah. I mean, how long am I going to do this in particular? Who knows? Because the company's cutting people right and left.
Yeah.
And one of these days, I used to have this belief of like, you know what? I work hard. I get results. Just like you back in the day, I'm like, I'm safe. But then they started cutting to the point where I'm like, oh, wow, they're just like cutting anybody now. It's not even like
right.
Well,
they're unfortunately, cuts are all based on numbers versus, maybe.
So my last contract negotiation, I remember saying specifically to my PD, who I love. So I wasn't saying this like I would seriously take a bullet for that man.
Yeah.
I wasn't saying this like at him. I was just saying this because he knows how hard I work and all that stuff. I said to him, just so you know, I'm not going to be, because I have a lot of friends in the industry they've been let go.
Sure.
And they'll get let go and they get very bitter and screw radio, screw this. But then, ... Hey, if anybody wants to give me a gig, I'll take it, blah, 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 blah. So I said to him, just so you know, I'm not going to be one of those guys who says, screw radio, but please hire me back. It'll suck, don't get me wrong, but I 100% could walk away and not have that, if I just worked a little harder, if I did, I know that I've maximized everything in my control. I said, so I'd walk away and I'd be like, all right, I'm done, because I'm not going to come back into the same situation.
Right.
So would I find something? There's a lot of things. It's funny. I've had this talk with my wife. There's a bunch of things that I would love to do and get into. It's just almost like narrowing it down.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And figuring out what it would be. And she actually is an attorney like your husband. Mm-hmm. So
we've been smart. We married those attorneys.
We married smart.
They keep you out of trouble.
We married smart. But so I mean that's where I'm at right now. Yeah. What I would do, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't.
I've always said, after you've had a big career like you've had, then you're just limited to your imagination.
Yeah.
It's like
it would be one of those things where I'm like, oh, that sucks. But I also wouldn't have. And you know what? If you asked me this maybe 5 years ago or whatever, it would have been a different answer. But now I'm like, I'd be able to look back and go, you know what? That was a good stage of my life.
There are more.
Yeah.
Yep.
Life is life. Let's see what's next.
You bet.
Any other questions?
Do you think P. Diddy's going to get convicted?
If he doesn't, then wow, we failed as a country. Yeah.
Okay, it's the trial just started, and they have his ex-girlfriend Cassie on, which
that alone,
putting her on this early, I think it has to be because every other witness after her is going to be almost like a branch off of her story, because she's kind of like the star witness against him. But that being said, already with the defense has text messages of her basically agreeing to do the things with him and sounding enthusiastic and things of that nature. So that kind of muddies the water a little bit. But at the same time, they're getting him for bringing sex workers over state lines and things of that nature. So that's he'll probably get. I don't know if he'll get busted for everything, but he'll get busted for some of the other charges.
I keep saying to my husband, so what's your defense? What's the defense? Well, the defense is that they were all consenting adults.
Yeah.
But were they all? I mean, I think that's the thing. I mean, I think eventually they're going to bring some people in who were not adults, and it's consenting or not.
It's consenting adult, and then maybe they consented up to a point.
Right.
It's like I think this is a very different case than just like somebody saying like you hear the word rape and you picture a man in the middle of the night grabbing a woman and assaulting her. Yeah. It's not necessarily that.
No. Mm-hmm.
It's, hey, do you guys want to go out and have a good time? Who the hell's going to say no to that?
Well, that's
and then, but it's like, wait a minute. Oh, this is what you meant by a good time? Do you know what I'm saying?
I do know.
So
I know
money
exactly.
and power. And,
It's money and
Yes.
power. It's
Yeah.
all. I mean, in the end, that's what it's all about: money
So-
and power. I think what's going to be interesting is if the defense gets crazy desperate and who they start bringing in.
Right.
Because there's a whole lot of people right now who are so nervous they don't know what to do with themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Because she has apparently, told details that is making everybody in the room wince.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine, and they showed pictures the other day,
Yeah.
video and stuff.
Yeah, they
She
released the full
She was
surveillance footage.
naming people. Her poor husband.
Oh,
I know
gosh,
it's the
I
mature thing
know.
to do, but I would not be able to be in that courtroom.
Can you imagine? I mean,
No.
his kids got up and left. They
Yeah.
aren't
Yeah.
staying to hear it.
And we'll have this discussion. I've had this discussion on the show, and Pebbles goes, I'm sure that she told him, beforehand. I go, I'm sure she did too. But there's something about having a private conversation.
You got it.
Versus the person telling details.
Sitting there 8 months pregnant with your baby.
Strangers giving like not by minute details, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
It's different than just being like, hey, this happened and this happened. I'm
Right.
like, I wish I could say I'm mature, and I'd be like, yeah, you get him, honey. I'd be like, I gotta go to the bathroom. I have to go cry.
Right?
I have one last
I got to
part.
go to Europe.
Yeah.
I'll be back.
I have one last one. I think you two, this would be a great question for the both of you. I know nothing about the Karen retrial. I'm not even kidding. This weekend, I said to my coworker, I'm going to watch that documentary on HBO Max. It's like Man in the Snow or whatever
Yeah.
it is, where they highlight both sides. I heard very thoroughly. Like, you get a clear depiction of both sides. Now, you don't have to share your opinions if you don't want to, but why do you think this case is getting so much media coverage compared to other murder trials that we've seen in recent years?
Yeah.
Why this?
I think the Dateline aspect of it, where I think the consensus is people saying she's being framed for something she didn't do.
Okay.
But there's so much more to that. I mean, it's if you just want to go straight legal aspects, I'm not really paying attention to the trial, to be honest. But from the things I hear, if you just want to go straight legal aspects, she's probably going to get off innocent just because there's so many. I don't know if it's the prosecution not doing a good job with what they're doing, or if maybe there was a little bit of corruption and hiding. I don't think this is one of those cases that it's just like 100% on one side and 0 on the other. I just think it's, she was from the opinion that I formed, they were like local yokels who would like to go to the bar, drink on a Friday night. Then they got in an argument because they were drunk and things like
Again.
that. Yeah. And things like that happened. And then now why people are drawn to it is, again, the Dateline aspect, and also the fact that she's not the most likable innocent person.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And I'm not comparing her to him, but because his case was much bigger back in the day, but it's like, this feels like the modern day OJ.
OJ, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you something. I had this expert who she's frequently an expert witness for cases like this. And she works on court TV, and she's following this case, minute by minute. And she said she's guilty. No two ways about it. He's a fabulous defense attorney, and he has put together a distraction. She said everybody in this case is a bad guy, and there was something going on in that house that they did not want people to see when they found out there was a dead guy in the driveway, which is why they stripped the basement down. They did all that, so maybe this was a drug den. I don't know, and they're cops, and it shouldn't have been,
Right.
and whatever. But nobody is a good guy in the case,
Right.
But she is absolutely this expert, this witness expert. She says she hit him, and she pulled away. Maybe she wasn't fully aware that she hit him because she was so drunk, but she hit him, and it's that simple.
Yeah. I mean, who knows?
So,
But-
that's the expert who
Yeah.
said that, and she was the one who said all these things. She's like, those guys in that house, they were easy. They were susceptible to a good defense attorney being able to say, "Oh, well, look at all these things that you did." Well, it's because they were doing something wrong, not necessarily killing this guy, but they were doing something wrong, And so everybody's tiptoeing on eggshells because everybody was doing something wrong.
Right.
But
and people in this day and age, people like getting extreme with stuff.
Yeah.
They like being like, these guys.
You bet.
They conspired that entire week to have him come to the house so they can murder him and throw him in the snow.
Yeah, exactly.
I literally, I'm excited to watch things. I'm not kidding. I really have no idea what the heck is going on. But I wanted to just ask
I think it's been a huge thing because, number one, she's cute.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's another thing.
And, she presents as if, she wasn't like a local, like you said, So I think that's it. There's intrigue there. He was a cop. Mm-hmm. They were at cop's house. It's like 12 hours later, the guy's found in the snow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the intrigue of all of it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like he was shot in, someplace or something like that. That might just be lost in the part that's lost in the whole thing is there is someone dead.
Mm-hmm.
And he was.
And who killed him?
Right, exactly. And his niece and nephew who had lost their parents, he was their guardian. And there's a very sad side to this story that is terrible. That always gets lost in these things because people get so into the intrigue of how it happened. But
what do you think? Guilty or innocent? Do you think she moves or like stays?
Oh, I think she'll stay. I think she's enjoyed the celebrity.
The attention, yeah.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah,
That's
I do.
hardcore. Moose, do you have any more questions for us?
No. Thank you for coming. You were fabulous.
Guys, thank you for having me. This was so fun. This went so fast, right? You
I love it. I could do this all day. I do such a poor job of promoting this podcast. I don't have any because I just honestly like the long form conversation, learning people's story. You start to get the theme for everybody who is successful. It's not this.
No, right.
It's you go down, you have down, up, whatever. You have setbacks.
100%.
And I think that's good for if anybody ever listens to it, the podcast, they're gonna learn that it's not. Well, you know what? I grew up. I had great parents. I went to college, and
life is not a straight line.
No, absolutely not.
It's not.
In all aspects.
Yeah. That's right.
Personal. I try and tell that to my kids all the time. I'm like, listen, it's set yourself up as good as possible because life is going to life itself.
You bet it.
And it's going to hit you when you least expect it. And the more prepared you are, the better it will be.
Yeah.
The better it'll be for you to deal with it. So
my dad, he's a philosopher.
Dude, your dad's the man. I haven't even met him, and I love the guy. He's an 85-year-old bodybuilder who drops knowledge. I love it. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you guys very much.